Eastern State Penitentiary did not emerge as an act of cruelty. It was born out of reform. People who believed that punishment could be moral rather than brutal, inward rather than theatrical, and corrective rather than vengeful. When Eastern State opened in Philadelphia in 1829, it was widely celebrated as the most humane prison ever built. But within a decade, evidence of psychological devastation began to surface, and the story of Eastern State begins not with the intent to harm, but the lesson that solitude does not heal the soul. In the late 18th century, punishment in colonial America was public, it was physical, it was humiliating. They used whipping posts, stocks, branding, and execution dominated criminal justice. Reformers increasingly viewed these methods as barbaric and ineffective, arguing that public punishment hardened criminals and degraded the moral fabric of society. Pennsylvania became a center for reformist thinking, and in 1787, civic leaders and religious reformers founded the Philadelphia Society for Alleviating the Miseries of Public Prisons, an organization committed to replacing corporal punishment with incarceration focused on moral transformation. Many of the members were Quakers, whose theology emphasized introspection, repentance, and inner light. They believed that crime resulted from moral disorder rather than inherent evil. One of the most influential voices was Dr. Benjamin Rush, a physician and a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Rush described criminal behavior as a disease of the moral faculties and advocated isolation as a therapeutic intervention. Solitude, he argued, could strip away corrupt influence and force offenders to confront their conscience. Crime could be cured, not merely punished. This intellectual framework fused Enlightenment rationalism, Protestant moral theology, and early medical metaphors. The prison would become a place of treatment, and from this idea came the term penitentiary, an institution designed to induce penitence. Now, out of these ideas became what was called the Pennsylvania system or separate system. Its defining principles were absolute solitude, enforced silence, individual labor, and religious reflection. Prisoners would live alone, work alone, and worship alone. Contact with other prisoners was prohibited. Silence was not merely encouraged, it was mandatory. And the Pennsylvania system stood in contrast to the Auburn system developed in New York, which allowed congregate labor under enforced silence. Pennsylvania reformers rejected Auburn as insufficiently transformative. They believed only complete isolation could prevent moral contamination and produce genuine repentance. What reformers underestimated was the psychological cost of sustained isolation. The system assumed that the human mind, deprived of social contact, would naturally turn inward in productive reflection. It did not account for loneliness, sensory deprivation, or the fundamental social nature of human cognition. What was designed for moral reform became torture, led to mental breakdowns, psychosis, death, and later hauntings. I'm Monty Mader.
I'm Andy Jones.
And today, the history and hauntings of East State Penitentiary, today on Highway to Hell.
Hello.
And we're back.
Hello.
We're back. We're going to talk about jail.
Love it.
We're talking about jail. And if you're watching this on video and you see I prefer Halloween Christmas sweater, it's because it's the week before Christmas when we're recording this. So I'm ready. But I also still prefer Halloween.
I got my Christmas stuff on too, my Exorcist hoodie.
The real meaning of Christmas.
The real meaning of Christmas.
I want to say a quick thank you to all the new Hellions who have joined us. We've had a whole bunch of new subscribers, new comments, new shares, new reviews.
Thank you.
We love it. Please remember to follow us on Instagram at Highway to Hell Pod. I'm going to be working a little bit more on that page. I've kind of neglected a little bit. I've been trying to figure out what my new life looks like after my business closed and working in content full time. So it's been...
I'm available to help.
Right? It's like I'm actually here to do things and stuff. Yeah, I just gotta break old habits,
I get that.
I'm really excited for today. We're going to talk about the history of Eastern State, but then we're going to talk about the hauntings. So we have a lot of really cool lore.
Very cool.
In East State. I've been to Philadelphia, but I haven't been to East State. So next time I'm up there, I'm going to have to go.
Put it on the list.
We need to it would be so cool to do a podcast series where we get one of those Sprinter vans and we just do a big road trip recording episodes as we go, kind of like a remote viewing. And then we could do at the end of the road trip, do a live one where people can come and buy tickets to the event.
That'd be a lot of fun, actually.
Be really
I like
fun.
the way you think, kid.
I'm thinking all the time. That's why I can't sleep. So let's start. Right? Who needs sleep? Nobody.
Not you.
No one.
It's like the old days.
When I do sit down on the couch, the cats look at me like, why are you here? You're never here. Why are you here?
Don't you have something to do?
Right? Let's talk about the history. So we're going to start with the history. We're going to go through the founding, what led to this idea, how prisoners were treated, some famous prisoners that were there, deaths that occurred, and then we're going to get to the hauntings that happened after it was closed. Construction of Eastern State Penitentiary began in 1821 on farmland northwest of Philly. An architect, John Haviland, was tasked with designing a building that embodied the Pennsylvania system in stone. The result was revolutionary. It truly was a revolutionary building and idea for its time. Eastern State's radial design consisted of long cell blocks extending like spokes from a central surveillance hub. Guards stationed in a rotunda could observe corridors without being seen. The design symbolized omnipresent authority and total oversight. In each cell was a sealed world. There was thick stone walls that were more than 11 feet high, a heavy wooden door with reinforced iron, a feeding slot for silent delivery of meals, a single skylight, often described as the eye of God, a private exercising yard, no windows facing outward. Cells were designed for single occupancy only. Prisoners could not share a space. Sound was dampened by the design of the building. Visual contact was eliminated, and the architecture itself enforced sensory deprivation. Movement within the prison was tightly controlled. Prisoners were often hooded when transported through corridors to prevent them from seeing or recognizing other inmates. Guards were instructed to avoid unnecessary conversation. The goal was total isolation, physical, visual, and auditory. Eastern State was not simply a building that contained prisoners. It was a machine engineered to restructure their inner life and mind. Eastern State officially opened on October 25th, 1829. The first prisoner admitted was Charles Williams, a farmer convicted of burglary. Williams was placed alone in a stone cell and immediately subjected to the regime of silence and solitude. From the beginning, prisoners lived under conditions of continuous solitary confinement. They slept, ate, worked, and exercised alone. Work typically consisted of shoemaking, weaving, or other handicrafts performed inside the cell. Religious instruction was conducted through doors or screens to prevent visual contact. Prisoners were forbidden from speaking, singing, whistling, or tapping messages. Any attempt at communication was treated as a serious disciplinary offense. The rules were strict and relentlessly enforced. The prisoners' early administrators described the environment as calm, orderly, and humane. Yeah, calm for you. Like, visitors were shown clean cells, controlled routines, and the absence of overt violence. Eastern State quickly gained international attention. European governments sent delegates to study its methods. Reformers praised it as a triumph of modern penology, which is just the study of like the penal system. Behind this orderly facade, signs of distress emerged almost immediately. Within the first decade, prison physicians and administrators recorded cases of prisoners exhibiting severe emotional and psychological disturbances. Prisoners paced compulsively in their cells. Some refused food. Others wept uncontrollably or became withdrawn and unresponsive. Reports described confusion, anxiety, insomnia, loss of concentration. A number of prisoners were transferred out of isolation due to mental collapse. The 19th century medical language was imprecise. Physicians were using terms like melancholia, mania, or derangement. Modern scholars recognize these descriptions as consistent with severe depression, anxiety disorders, and psychosis. Importantly, many affected prisoners had entered Eastern State without documented mental illness, and their deterioration occurred after prolonged isolation. Now, what's interesting about this is all of the cells were the same, like very bare bones, except for one person's cell.
I wonder who.
I wonder who that one person is.
I wonder who it could be.
Who is that person, Andy?
Mr. Al Capone.
Yeah, Al Capone made a pit stop here.
Gangster, which is kind of interesting. I think we, maybe you're more familiar with his stay at Alcatraz than anything. This is kind of, to me anyway, almost like kind of like the forgotten thing in his career as a gangster. But yeah, Al Capone, he was at the Eastern State Penitentiary from 1929 to 1930, so not a very long time. So Al Capone was incarcerated at Eastern State Penitentiary in 1929, 100 years after it opened. He was transferred from Holmesburg Prison after pleading guilty to carrying a concealed weapon in Philadelphia. Wonder what that could have been. Unlike most prisoners at Eastern State, Capone's incarceration was highly atypical and carefully managed due to his notoriety and connections. Capone was housed in a private cell furnished far beyond standard conditions. Contemporary accounts and Eastern State records indicate his cell included fine furniture, oriental rugs, artwork, a cabinet radio, everything that would be in a prison.
Right, he gets a radio in a prison where silence is enforced.
Yeah, that's kind of odd, isn't it? I wonder if he had any,
knew somebody.
Connections. No,
right?
They were just being nice to him.
Paid somebody off.
This level of comfort stood in stark contrast to the prison's normal conditions, where most inmates lived in a bare stone cell with minimal possessions. Capone's cell has since been reconstructed based on documentation and is one of the most visited exhibits at the site. Despite these accommodations, Capone's time at Eastern State was not a vacation. He remained isolated from the general prison population, largely for security reasons, and was deeply concerned about assassination attempts and rival gangs. Kind of odd. I mean, I get it. Kind of a paranoid guy. But
and I do think at this point that, well, he probably was more paranoid because he was so close to New York.
Fair enough, yeah.
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 And I think part of the, I think by the 1900s, they had stopped the silence enforcement. But they actually do have an exhibit where they show like how nice his cell was compared to everybody else.
That's unbelievable. And I mean, I know his whole career was not based in New York for very long. I mean, he was born in New York, but it never really got going for him until he went to Chicago. And that's when he became kind of that, legendary character. His incarceration at Eastern State lasted approximately 8 months, after which he was transferred back to Chicago. Historically, Capone's presence at Eastern State is important not because of suffering, but because of what it exposes. The gap between the prison's public reputation, its everyday brutality for ordinary prisoners, and the privileges extended to powerful figures. And I mean, I'm sure some of that still goes on to this day.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Yeah, exactly.
Who, gave like a interview quotation marks, and she gets transferred to a low security prison where she's got people waiting on her hand and foot.
Oh yeah.
Like. And human trafficker.
Capone's no angel, obviously, but arguably somebody that makes Capone look like a choir boy.
Yeah, by comparison.
Yeah.
I'd take all out.
He was a bootlegger. I mean, people were killed, but not.
Like that wasn't his his business wasn't the harm of people.
No, not at all.
Harm was like collateral to the illegal enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, still happens.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go back 100 years back in time. I loved that. I found that. I was like, wait, Al Capone was housed here? What do you mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like one of the forgotten stays of his criminal career, if you will.
But back when they were still enforcing silence, rather than prompting reform, early evidence of mental harm was absorbed into the institution's ideology. Administrators interpreted breakdowns as resistance to repentance and evidence of deeply flawed moral character. If you're having a mental breakdown because you've been in isolation for a year, it's your fault. Suffering was framed as part of the corrective process. This interpretive move was critical because by defining distress as a moral problem rather than an institutional one, Eastern State insulated itself from critique and abused prisoners further. This logic allowed the prison to persist despite mounting concerns. Reformers had invested too much moral capital in the idea of solitary confinement to abandon it so easily, and the Pennsylvania system had not become merely a method, but a belief. The enforcement of silence required more than architecture and rules. It required coercion. Guards were tasked with preventing communication at all costs. When prisoners attempted to speak or signal to one another, punishment followed. By the early 1830s, disciplinary practices at Eastern State had already escalated beyond passive isolation. They used restraints, deprivation, physical coercion to maintain silence. These practices would intensify in subsequent decades and reveal a central contradiction of the penitentiary ideals. It was a system built to avoid physical punishment, increasingly using physical punishment to function. By the late 1830s, Eastern State stood at a crossroads. It was internationally admired, architecturally influential, and ideologically confident, but beneath the surface, its foundational premise was cracking. Isolation was not producing uniform repentance, it was producing uniform breakdown. Administrators responded, again, not by dismantling the system, not by asking questions, not by asking for help. They doubled down. Silence would be enforced moving forward more strictly, and the discipline would become harsher. The stage was set for the next phase of Eastern State's history, one in which the prison's commitment to solitude would harden into doctrine, and the doctrine would justify practices that even contemporary observers would describe as being unconscionably cruel. By the 1830s, it was no longer an experiment. This is running, but now because they've put so much of their life, their money, their reputation in this idea, they're not going to admit that it's not working. The daily reality of solitary confinement at Eastern State differed starkly from reformist abstractions. Prisoners were confined to stone cells for nearly the entire day. Work was conducted alone, typically shoemaking, things with their hands, things where they're sitting. Exercise occurred in a small private yard attached to each cell, enclosed by high walls that prevented any view of the outside world. Meals were delivered silently through those slots. Human voices were exceptionally rare. The monotony was relentless. Days were structured but indistinguishable. Seasonal changes were barely perceptible. Prisoners lacked any meaningful sensory input beyond stone, iron, and the narrow light from above. Letters were restricted. Visits were rare and tightly controlled. The prison did not merely restrict freedom of movement, it restricted relational existence. 19th century reformers believed that such conditions would quiet the mind and awaken the conscience. Instead, for many prisoners, isolation produced anxiety, disorientation, and despair. Prisoners reported losing track of time. Some fixated obsessively on minor stimuli like cracks in the walls, the sound of footsteps, the movement of light. Others withdrew inward, becoming mute, catatonic, or unresponsive. These experiences were not anomalies. They were sufficiently widespread to attract attention from prison physicians, inspectors, and visiting observers within the prison's first decade. How long could you go, do you think, in total isolation?
I'm a little worried, though, too, because what you're describing sounds like my existence. In some ways, he was totally isolated, not much going on. It's been my last couple months. But no, like, all joking aside, in terms of that, probably not very long.
Man, I mean...
Probably not long at all, especially now because like we're so used to having so many stimuli, phones, computers.
Our brains
TV.
would just fry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think, once it gets to the point where you can't tell the passage of days.
Yeah.
I think I would lose it. And I can't, I'd have to double check this. I didn't look this back up, but I think they don't recommend like solitary confinement for more than a week is like mentally like problematic.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine. Like, I can't imagine even making it a month.
Even in today's prison system, when you get thrown in the hole, that's that isolation.
It's very restricted periods.
You still get yard time. They still let them out for a little bit. Like I know if you follow any sort of what they call mob tube, YouTube guys, Michael Francis, he was a big time mob guy. I mean, he was in solitary in prison for over a year. They threw him in there. I mean, he was a pretty high-ranking guy at the time, and he talked about he's spoken out. He's like, I don't believe in that. I don't think it should be a thing.
Yeah, I mean, at least then the guards can talk to you.
Yeah,
right. They can at least say something to you. That's like, it's crazy that even the guards weren't supposed to speak around, like total silence.
Probably had to be hard for the guards, even.
It would just be so disorienting.
And to me too, this whole like method. It seems like it should be like something that's even older. Yeah, it seems like very medieval.
It does.
Kind of like, oh, what's wrong with you? Let's put some leeches on him.
Even if you look at like a hermit or somebody who like goes to the woods for 6 months or whatever, and you're in a cabin by yourself, even if you have no tech. Yeah. But you're hearing birds, you're hearing animals, you hear the weather, you see the light. Like there's sound happening around you. I find it so disturbing. When I was prepping this, I was just like, this actually bothers this bothers me more than being in a room where like they don't turn off the light and they're like blasting music or something.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I think this disturbs me more.
Yeah, there's something, it's just very inhuman, that level of treatment. And why aren't they getting better?
Oh, I don't know why.
I don't know why. But it like, again, it just seems like a very medieval thing.
It really does.
Like they tried this back in like the King Arthur days or something,
just keep it totally quiet.
It
sounds like something monks would propose.
Monty Python and the Holy Grail just hitting themselves, one of those kind of thought of by those people, right?
Right.
Not the Monty Python people, but the
just
religious people
that
at the
era.
time. Yeah, very, very odd.
So Eastern State did employ medical staff from its earliest years. The physicians were required to monitor prison health, keep infirmary logs, and medical summaries from the 19th century. There was repeated instances of mental disturbance among prisoners subjected to prolonged isolation. Physicians recorded symptoms, again, using that older diagnostic language: melancholia, which was deep, persistent sadness; mania, which was agitation, erratic behavior, or delusion; nervous exhaustion; and derangement. None of these terms lack specificity of our modern psychiatric diagnosis. Their descriptions align closely with what contemporary physicians would recognize as major depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, psychosis, and trauma-related conditions. What is especially significant is that many of the prisoners who deteriorated mentally were recorded as having entered Eastern State with no signs of mental illness. Their breakdown occurred during confinement. Jeez. And despite this evidence, Eastern State's administration did not treat mental deterioration as a systemic failure. They framed it as individual weakness, resistance to reform, or basically rebellion.
I was going to jokingly say weakness, and then you said, I'm like, oh my God, these people are nuts.
These people are nuts.
Good God.
And we also have to remember that modern psychiatry did not exist in the 1830s. Mental illness was interpreted through overlapping frameworks of moral philosophy, religious beliefs, early neurology, and emerging asylum medicine, which is a whole, I mean, we could do a whole episode on just asylums and how awful they were. The concept of moral insanity was particularly influential. It referred to individuals who appeared rational, but behaved in socially deviant or emotionally unstable ways. It was a moral failing. Within this framework, prisoners who deteriorated in isolation were viewed as morally defective instead of being damaged by confinement. And their breakdown confirmed the diagnosis. So it was kind of just this repeating diagnosis and confirmation. This interpretive lens created a closed system of reasoning. Solitary confinement was presumed to be morally corrective, even though there was no proof of that. If a prisoner deteriorated, the cause was assumed to be the prisoner's moral weakness, not the environment. Physicians working within prisons were also constrained by institutional hierarchy. Medical staff reported illness, but lacked authority to alter the penal policy. Their observations were filtered through the administration's priorities that emphasized order, discipline, and ideological consistency. As the Pennsylvania system spread internationally, comparisons between prison models became unavoidable. By the 1840s, reformers and officials had access to comparative data from congregate labor prisons operating under the Auburn system. This is the system that allows them to work in groups quietly. These comparisons consistently revealed a troubling pattern. Prisons emphasizing prolonged solitary confinement exhibit higher rates of mental illness than those allowing controlled social interaction. Prisoners held in isolation were more likely to exhibit hallucinations, emotional collapse, and long-term impairment. European observers visiting Eastern State took note. Some praised the architecture while quietly abandoning the practice of isolation. Others expressed open concern about the psychological effects of solitude, and these critiques circulated in reform literature, penal congresses, and medical discussions, but Eastern State refused to change their model. The administrators modified certain practices, like allowing limited labor variation or occasional supervised contact, but the core commitment to isolation stayed the same. And the most influential public critique of Eastern State came from Charles Dickens, who visited the prison in 1842. During his American tour, Dickens was initially sympathetic to penal reform and curious about American innovations, and what he encountered at Eastern State profoundly disturbed him. In American Notes for General Circulation, Dickens described prisoners who appeared mentally broken by isolation. He emphasized not physical brutality, but psychological torment. Prisoners, he wrote, were buried alive, deprived of human connection, and reduced to states of anxiety and despair. Dickens rejected the claim that solitary confinement was humane, arguing that its suffering was less visible but no less severe than corporal punishment. He condemned the system as a form of torture inflicted on not the body but the mind. And his critique mattered because it framed the issue in moral rather than technical terms. Dickens forced readers to confront the human cost of a system that appeared on the outside to be orderly and civilized. Eastern State, of course, dismissed Dickens as a sentimental and uninformed author, yet his observations echoed what prison physicians and reformers had already been documenting. And again, they just keep going. Eastern State, rather than dismantling the system or changing it, they responded to the criticism with rationalization. They argued that only weak and corrupt individuals suffer breakdowns, isolation prevented worse harms associated with criminal association, and that temporary suffering was justified by the long-term moral reform. These arguments relied heavily on counterfactual claims. The alternative could be worse. So they're just making things up like, well, if we don't do this to them, it's going to be so much worse.
Yeah.
It's like it's going to be a slippery slope. And the prison also benefited from its symbolic power. Eastern State was not merely a local jail, it was a global model. To admit failure would be to admit that decades of reformist effort had been misguided. And as the psychological distress increased, isolation did not diminish. They just would not let it, like, we see that now.
The arrogance of it all.
Right, and we have systems that we see everywhere that we're like, this isn't working. It's never working. It's never worked. And people are like, we can't do anything different. Yeah, absolutely not.
Literally every system, it's just broken or a scam, but nope, can't change it. Nope,
so the solution to the problem is to do nothing.
Yeah. Let's just have it be the way it's always been and just, don't question anything.
And so they made the best decision they could. And whenever they had psychological distress, they just intensified their efforts. So prisoners who exhibited agitation or noncompliance were subjected to extended solitary confinement, darker cells, and additional deprivation. Mental illness was treated as misconduct. And this escalation marked a turning point. They now are going to start to add punitive physical punishments. By the mid-19th century, Eastern State was no longer merely an experiment. It was an institution that had normalized psychological suffering and torture as part of its reform.
Good God.
And by the 1850s, there was so much evidence that isolation was producing mental harm. There was contemporary observers, medical records, literary figures. They had confirmed studies, but they continued to persist. And now they're going to start to add physical punishment. Over time, disciplinary measures escalated, diversified, and normalized. It transformed Eastern State into an institution where psychological deprivation and physical coercion functioned together as tools of control. This evolution did not occur all at once. It unfolded across decades, shaped by they were now overcrowded, resistance to their efforts, administrative denial that it wasn't working, and shifting public scrutiny. Now, the 1830s were the crucible years of Eastern State's disciplinary regime. Silence was the prison's defining rule. Any breach of this was treated as a fundamental threat to the institution. That didn't matter if it was speaking, tapping, signaling. Any kind of breaking of silence was strictly enforced. To enforce silence, guards relied on restraints and punitive measures that quickly exceeded the prison's humane claims. The most infamous of these was the iron gag, a device used to prevent speech through painful restraint. And we have a story about the iron gag.
All right. Matthias Macumsey, a prisoner reduced to silence. The historical record preserves only fragments of Matthias Macumsey's life. The absence itself part of the story. Like thousands of early 19th century prisoners, Macumsey entered the American penal system as a name attached to a conviction, not as a fully recorded person. What survives is not a detailed biography, but a documented death, one that exposes the brutal reality behind the reformist ideals of Eastern State Penitentiary. Macumsey was incarcerated at Eastern State in the early 1830s during the prison's first decade of operation. At that time, Eastern State was the flagship institution of the Pennsylvania system, which mandated total solitary confinement, enforced silence, and isolation as tools of moral reform. Prisoners were kept alone in stone cells, forbidden from speaking to one another, and prevented from seeing other inmates. Silence was not symbolic, it was absolute. Records do not clearly document Macumsey's crime. That was not unusual. Many early penitentiary records prioritized sentence and discipline over personal history. What is documented and what matters historically is that Macumsey violated the prison's strict rules against communication. Whether he spoke, attempted to signal another prisoner, or otherwise broke silence is not specified in surviving sources. What is clear is that prison authorities treated the violation as serious enough to warrant extreme punishment. In June 1833, Macumsey was subjected to a device known as the iron gag. The iron gag was a metal restraint designed specifically to prevent speech. It was placed over the tongue and secured by chains connected to wrist shackles behind the back. Any movement of the head or arms caused the metal to press more deeply into the tongue, producing intense pain and injury. The device was not intended to correct behavior through reflection. It was intended to enforce silence through physical suffering. Macumsey was restrained with the iron gag for a prolonged period. He did not survive. Historical documentation identifies his death as occurring while the iron gag was still in place. This detail is critical. It indicates that the punishment was not immediately halted when he weakened or collapsed. Silence was enforced until his body failed. Macumsey's death became one of the earliest and most damning documented incidents at Eastern State Penitentiary. It occurred less than 4 years after the prison opened and directly contradicted its public image as a humane alternative to corporal punishment. The iron gag itself was later cited in investigations and preserved in historical archives as implement of torture. Lovely. Yet, the institutional response was not reform. Eastern State did not abandon solitary confinement. It did not renounce extreme disciplinary measures. Macumsey's death was absorbed into the system and rationalized as a necessary consequence of enforcing order. The prison continued operating under the same philosophy for decades. What makes Matthias Macumsey's story uniquely horrifying is not only how he died, but what his death reveals. Eastern State was designed to eliminate physical cruelty by replacing it with psychological reform. Instead, it demonstrated that a system built on absolute silence could not function without violence. Macumsey's life remains largely unknown. His crime is obscured by time, but his death is preserved because it exposes the truth behind one of the most influential penal experiments in modern history. He was not executed by the state. He was not sentenced to death. He was punished for speaking. And the punishment did not end until he was permanently silent.
Man, that is just like... Because it makes me wonder what happened to him. Like, it makes me wonder, like, did he faint? Did he pass out and it killed him? Like, because
probably.
If he has it on, presumably he can't eat or drink anything.
Could have been that.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so
Could've
did
just
they
starved
starve him to death?
That might have been a unfortunate byproduct. I mean,
It's so, like, I don't,
yeah.
and you look, and this is not unique to this, like you look through history and like what humans have done to other humans.
Oh man.
Like we are monsters.
And that's something too. It's funny you say that because, whenever you watch horror movies, right?
Yeah.
There's always a monster, a creature, something. Just remember, any sort of horrible thing that's happened has not been done by something like that. It's done by people.
Yep. It's inspired by people.
Yeah. And people are the worst of the worst out there. We could be great, caring, doing, the absolute, doing the right thing all the time, or it could just go the opposite way. And I mean, look at like Dietrich Bonhoeffer versus, Mengele.
Yeah.
They're both human beings, but at just opposite ends.
So, and it's like
it's insane.
Our capability for evil is so horrific.
It's there. Everybody has it.
It's just, and just like, for me, it's not even the evil, it's the cruelty.
Yeah.
It's, it's the cruelty. Like right before this episode, I was recording for Flipping Tables and I was talking about Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the Holocaust, and like the fact that people can create that in their minds and then execute it.
Yeah, it's insane.
Is, and someone, I think it was Logan. Logan's the bass player of our band, was telling me, he was like, you think about like cancer in the body, like it just consumes and consumes and consumes and consumes. That's why it's so deadly.
Yep.
And it replicates. And he was like, that's the way that humans are a lot of the time. We just consume and consume and consume, and we take and we take and we take, and we don't pour out, we don't replenish, we don't practice stewardship. And it makes me feel like humans are going to be the first species that makes ourselves extinct.
Yeah, I could totally see that happening. And the whole
Whether
mindset,
it's because we burn the planet or we just kill each other.
maybe it'll happen simultaneously.
A little bit of both, yeah.
Yeah. But, it's, and he's absolutely right saying that. It's like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. I'd trade it all for a little more.
Yep.
Yeah, how much do you need?
It's never enough. I mean, the fact we've had Elon Musk on pace to be a trillionaire.
Why?
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
and like the top 10% in the country control, I believe it's now 67% of the economy.
Lovely.
And that's why things are so expensive. Because when you look back in like America's period when we had the best economy in the history of the world, which was between 1948 and 1972, when you could raise a family of 4 on one salary, it was because the top 10% only controlled 8% of the economy.
As it should be.
You know what I mean? That's how it should be. I agree.
Lovely. I mean, I couldn't consciously have that much money. I would feel wrong, man.
I am with Dolly Parton on this. Dolly Parton could be a multi-billionaire times over.
Yep.
And she chooses not to.
Yeah.
She gives it away. And she keeps giving it away.
And she's doing just fine.
And I think, when we were in that phase in America where we were taking down all the Civil War statues, let's replace them with Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Dolly Parton.
Dolly,
we can't trust people that don't love Dolly.
Dolly Parton put Arnold up there, Schwarzenegger, that is.
Oh man.
I kid.
I joke.
Don't come at me.
All right. So by the time we get to the 1860s, not only are they torturing people, the other thing they would do is they would put people in baths or douse them with water and put them outside until ice started to form on their skin. So by the mid-19th century, Eastern State is facing chronic overcrowding. These cells that were designed for one person are housing multiple prisoners. And obviously this undermines the theoretical foundation of the system, but they did not soften discipline. Like you still had to follow it. It intensified and stressed the conflict. The combination of overcrowding and enforced silence created conditions of constant tension. Guards responded with stricter discipline and more frequent punishment. Punishment became bureaucratized, and it was not as controversial anymore. They just kept going further and further and further. Records from prison histories indicate that punishment was increasingly standardized, applied according to rule violations rather than individual assessment. So like, again, regardless of someone's mental state, they're going to get punished the same way. Jeez. This normalization marked a turning point. Violence and deprivation were no longer framed as regrettable necessities. They were just part of how the prison functioned. And as Eastern State transitioned into a more industrial model of incarceration, forced labor became central to daily life. Prisoners were required to produce goods, again, shoes, textiles, and other items under strict supervision. Labor was framed as rehabilitative. It always is, but it also serves to do what? Make the institution money.
Ding, ding,
Refusal or the inability to work was treated as insubordination. Punishments for labor resistance included, you guessed it, isolation, deprivation, and loss of privileges. For prisoners already weakened by isolation or illness, this created a vicious cycle of psychological distress, impairing their productivity, which triggered punishment, which intensified their distress. Medical neglect compounded these harms. Prison infirmaries documented illness, but treatment was minimal. Mental illness in particular remained poorly understood and largely untreated. Psychiatric distress was managed through discipline rather than care. One of the most disturbing aspects of Eastern states' history during the 19th century was the incarceration of children and adolescents. Records indicate that between 1833 and 1850, nearly 300 youths between the ages of 11 and 20 were confined in Eastern state for crimes ranging from theft to serious violence. These young prisoners were subjected to the same isolation regime as adults. They experienced prolonged solitary confinement during critical development periods, deprived of social interaction, education, and emotional support. And while 19th century reformers lacked modern developmental psychology, the harm potential of isolating children was not invisible. How could it be? Some contemporaries expressed concern, but the institution's commitment to uniform discipline prevailed. Youth were treated as morally deviant adults rather than individuals with Can you imagine being 11?
Yeah, no way.
And like just during that critical, like you're going into puberty, and like now you're in a room by yourself, and like you can't talk, you can't cry, you can't
nothing.
Oh, like if you weren't broken before you got there, like if you're there because you stole something, you're going to be broken when you get out.
Oh yeah, that I mean, yeah, I couldn't imagine that at all. I mean, there's no way you're bouncing back from that.
No way.
You know, you're just going to be completely shattered
Yeah,
mentally.
and it didn't matter what age you were.
God,
which is crazy. Oh my God, that's like the thing. Like when people want to charge they want to charge certain people as adults and certain people not.
Yeah.
But like when you're talking about like charging a 14-year-old who stole a car, as an adult, but then we've got Jesse Mack Butler, who's an adult who was facing 78 years in prison for multiple counts of rape, sodomy, strangulation, no jail time.
Yeah, no,
because
none at
his
all.
dad's a coach at OSU.
I don't understand how somebody in today's world, like in their 30s, like me, a man, a lot of times, oh, he's just a kid, but yet you look at like a 12-year-old girl, oh, she's a woman.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. It's like, what?
Get out of here.
Get out of here. Like, exactly. That's
freak.
exactly it. Like, I've never heard the term underage man.
Never.
But I hear underage woman all the time.
Yeah.
And like, unfortunately, and especially working in social media now, you hear all these guys are like, well,
They're deranged.
they would go lower if 18 wasn't the law.
They're fucking deranged.
It's so gross. Or they like wait for the day she turns 18 and they're like 35. I can't imagine, like, stop, full stop. Hold on. I'm going to lean back. I can't imagine going on a date with a 25-year-old. No way.
Yeah.
What?
No way. It's my girlfriend and I, we were watching Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay yesterday, and one of the chefs, he was 31 and had a 19-year-old girlfriend.
Oh.
I looked at my girlfriend. I go, what would you? I'm 34. What would I would never.
Like, what would
Sorry
we
if I'm
talk about?
stuttering. I just don't know what to say
What
here.
would we talk about?
Like,
I mean, I guess the point's not to talk. And like clearly, like so many of these men, like women their age don't want them because they have issues they're not willing to deal with, but they want someone they can control is what it's about.
Yeah, pretty much.
And purity culture plays into that because when you prioritize like virginity and stuff, you create kind of these pedophilic systems.
It's very strange.
It's so gross. It's so gross. Because
I
again,
would be attracted.
Exactly. Like someone in their 20s, like the amount of convincing it would take for me to date someone who's like 28.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no way. No way. And then we don't realize how old we are until like I'm talking to my nieces who are like 20 and 22.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But like
antique Pokemon cards.
Right. Antique
Thanks,
Pokemon
Nathan.
cards.
Thanks, Gerard.
But thinking that like a 45-year-old man would want to date one of my nieces.
Yeah, very, very disturbing.
It's really predatory.
Very disturbing.
It's so gross.
And it's 9 out of 10 times that way. It's not the other way around.
You very rarely, we
Very
very
rarely.
rarely see the opposite where there's a big age difference and the woman is older.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely.
Very rarely.
And it's, and that's not to say like women do like commit crimes. Like you see this with like teachers and stuff sometimes where they have a relationship with a high schooler, but it's so rare. It's so rare.
It always happens in Florida too.
It's always in Florida.
What's up with that?
And to the surprise of no one, racial inequality also permeated Eastern States operations. African American
shocked.
prisoners were disproportionately incarcerated and more frequently subjected to harsh discipline. They were overrepresented in labor assignments and less likely to receive leniency or early release. Punishment practices did not exist in a racial vacuum. Discipline was shaped by broader social hierarchies that devalued Black lives and normalized their suffering. While Eastern States official rules were nominally colorblind quotation marks, their enforcement reflected the racial biases of the 19th century American society. This unequal burden of punishment further eroded the prison's moral claims, an institution that purported to reform souls operated with and reinforced systems of racial injustice. And by the late 1800s, Eastern States' original philosophy largely collapsed in practice, but not in rhetoric. They were still preaching the same thing while experiencing overcrowding, decaying infrastructure, and administrative inertia. Reform efforts during this period were limited and largely cosmetic. While some of the changes were made to improve sanitation or efficiency, the psychological harm and punitive isolation remained unaddressed because they just would not admit that they were wrong. Punishment
sinking.
Right? Sinking fast,
Not to interrupt,
too.
sorry. It's just the ship's sinking.
It is
Let's
so
just double
frustrating.
down.
It's like just, and it's been like, at this point, it's been, 40 years.
Yeah.
And they're still like, nope, can't see it. I'm blind in one eye.
It works just fine. Meanwhile, it's like the Titanic. The band's still playing, and the guy just hit the propeller.
Yep.
Not good.
Yep. By the early 20th century, Eastern State functioned as an aging industrial prison. Forced labor remained central, and discipline focused on productivity and compliance rather than reform. Medical neglect became increasingly visible. Tuberculosis outbreaks, malnutrition, and untreated mental illness were documented in the institution's records and reform literature. Psychiatric care remained minimal. Prisoners suffering from hallucinations, severe depression, or cognitive impairment were often confined rather than treated. Punishment practices during this period included segregation units to isolate disruptive prisoners, deprivation of work or privileges, which was often your only social time, and continued reliance on other actual punitive physical punishments. Across these decades, a clear pattern emerges that punishment in Eastern State was not incidental. It was part of the actual structure, that social isolation caused extreme psychological harm, and that the institution itself refused to address it and refused to help prisoners get better or to change their policies in order to enact that. The next phase of the prison's history would bring this reality into sharper focus as medical science, legal standards, and public expectations shifted in ways Eastern State could no longer accommodate. And it makes me also, I just think, and this is something like a progressively, I get angry about this the older I get. You cannot have justice when prisons are for profit.
Absolutely.
You can't. I mean, there's a reason that the United States outpaces incarceration. Well, there's two reasons. One is we have a for-profit system that every person you lock up, you make money off of. And then the second thing is we have no social safety nets.
Nope.
Because when you look at countries where you don't have to worry about housing and education and medical care, crime rates drop.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Yeah. Imagine that.
It's so frustrating because the evidence, we're in the same situation right now. The evidence is right in front of us, but there's too many people making too much money. Like the GEO group that Pam Bondi used to represent, they're the largest owner of private prisons. We can't have that person.
Sounds like really good people.
Right? We can't have that person being the attorney general. Obviously that's going to create a problem.
Why not? They love America. You hate America.
So frustrating.
It's like that. It's like that Family Guy clip. You hate America.
It's so
I'm just trying to talk here. No, but you're absolutely
I just
right.
like data. I just want us to follow the data.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no. Yeah. Why would we follow facts and data?
Why would we do that?
Well, no, it's that those are liberal lies.
And what's even more sad about this is that late 1800s, early 1900s, Eastern State is still being praised as this great institution.
Yeah.
Oh, look at all this reform. And it's none of it's working.
Oh, look, it looks really good.
None of it's working.
It looks great. It's working really well. Pansu prisoners just drooling in the yard, probably, just scrambled. It
was just so destructive. And by the 1920s, Eastern State, the architecture, which was once revolutionary, had become a liability. The thick stone walls and narrow cells were made modernization difficult. Plumbing and sanitation systems were deteriorating. Ventilation was poor. Fire safety was inadequate. Ugh. Cells designed for isolation were increasingly used for double occupancy, intensifying stress and conflict. The prison no longer operated as a true separate system, yet solitary confinement persisted as a primary disciplinary tool. Prisoners who violated rules were deemed disruptive and were isolated further. And at the same time, the medical understanding of mental illness was advancing rapidly. Psychiatry emerged as a more formal discipline. Physicians increasingly recognized that sensory deprivation and prolonged isolation could cause or exacerbate mental illness. Again, we see hallucinations, paranoia, depression, emotional blunting, and they're no longer dismissed as moral weakness. Again, the institutional practices lagged well behind medical knowledge. The institution continued to push back on changes in science and the medical industry and refused to change their solitary confinement policies. By the mid-20th century, medical critiques of prolonged isolation were no longer marginal. This is where it became increasingly popular. Studies of prisoners exposed to solitary confinement documented these high rates of mental illness, and sensory deprivation was increasingly understood as a form of stress and torture that could induce psychosis, even in previously healthy individuals. Eastern State's own history made it a prime example of these harms. It was documented within its medical records. Retrospective analysis of the 19th century medical records confirmed that the psychological breakdown had been observed from the beginning. And what had changed was not the evidence, but the interpretive framework. And so this pressure is increasing for them to finally change their policies or shut down, as well as the buildings completely falling into disrepair. Alongside medical developments, legal standards governing incarceration were evolving. Courts increasingly recognized that punishment extended beyond physical injury to include psychological harm. The Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment was interpreted more broadly, encompassing conditions of confinement, inhumane treatment, and torture. And while no single court ruling shuttered the Eastern State, the cumulative effect of legal scrutiny mattered. Prison conditions were no longer shielded from constitutional evaluation. Overcrowding, isolation, malnutrition, and inadequate medical care exposed institutions to legal risk. Eastern State, with its aging facilities and entrenched disciplinary practices, was poorly positioned to adapt. Renovation would have required a massive investment, and the prison's layout made compliance with emerging safety standards difficult, if not impossible. By the 1950s and 60s, Eastern State was widely regarded as outdated. Reports described deteriorating conditions, chronic understaffing, and insufficient medical services. The prison no longer claimed to rehabilitate through isolation, but it did, again, continue to use isolation quite frequently. Inmates lived in crumbling cells. There was no plumbing. Fire hazards multiplied. Psychological services were inadequate, and the institution functioned less as a site of reform than a warehouse for the incarcerated. Importantly, Eastern State did not undergo a moral transformation before they closed. There was no institutional confession of error, no official repudiation of the original Pennsylvania system. The prison simply became too expensive and too dangerous and too obsolete to keep operating. In 1970, Pennsylvania officials ceased operating Eastern State as a penitentiary. The decision was driven by cost, deterioration, and the availability of newer facilities that were better suited to modern legal standards. In 1971, the site was briefly used as a city jail before being fully abandoned. By the time it closed, Eastern State had confined approximately 75,000 people over 142 years. Its closure marked the end of one of the longest-running penal experiments in modern history. The manner of its closure is telling. Eastern State did not close, again, because of its really inhumane treatment. It closed because the institution itself could no longer function. It was too expensive, and not expensive in human lives, expensive in dollars.
The only thing that they care about.
Right. And after its closure, Eastern State sat abandoned for years. The roof collapsed in places, vegetation overtook cell blocks, and the silence that once imprisoned thousands now settled permanently on the structure itself. In the late 20th century, preservationists and historians recognized the site's significance. Rather than demolish the prison, advocates argued for its preservation as a historic site. The Eastern State eventually reopened as a museum and educational center, presenting its history to the public in raw, unfinished form. The decision to preserve Eastern State raised ethical questions. How should a society remember places built for human suffering? What does it mean to walk through spaces where isolation destroyed people's minds? Eastern State's curators chose to emphasize its contradictions: reform and harm, idealism and cruelty, innovation and failure. The site became a space not of celebration, but of honesty and reckoning. Obviously, its enduring legacy is its contribution to the understanding of the psychological effects of solitary confinement long before modern neuroscience could confirm those dangers or clearly define them. It's a pretty rough place in history, not just as an early experiment in isolation, but as a warning of repeatedly ignoring the sacrifice of human life in favor of an ideal that just doesn't work in the real life. Eastern State Penitentiary was founded on a moral ambition to reform without brutality, and it did exactly the opposite. The institution mistook silence for reflection, suffering for repentance, and discipline for healing. From its earliest years, evidence of psychological harm was visible, and they ignored it for decades. Punishment escalated, isolation hardened into doctrine, violence and deprivation became normalized until it finally closed in 1971. It left behind more than ruins. It left behind a historical record demonstrating that human beings cannot be isolated into moral clarity, that humans are communal by nature. The mind cannot thrive in silence, it fractures. Eastern State stands today not as a monument to reform, but as a warning carved in stone. When ideology overrides your evidence, suffering becomes your policy. And unfortunately, in places like this where such horror happens and exists, we see hauntings.
Absolutely.
And it's one of the most haunted places in the United States. And anywhere where there is prolonged and repetitive human suffering creates these, and we don't know about the paranormal. We don't know if it's ghosts. We don't know if it's some kind of energetic imprint. Science will figure that out someday. But we do know that this place has a lot of weird things going on.
No, it really, really does. That was one thing that was interesting about doing the research on this is, I think I'd before had known a little bit about it, but not all the history that we talked about today. But like, Capone, we had talked about. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that now. But yeah, there's a lot of hauntings. So Eastern State Penitentiary closes a functioning prison in 1971, but it never fully emptied. Ooh, cue the theremin music. Yeah. Halloween theremin music. Long before it reopened as a historic site, reports began to surface from guards, maintenance workers, preservation staff, and early visitors who described experiences that did not align with simple abandonment. These accounts, collected over decades, form one of the most extensively documented bodies of paranormal testimony associated with any former American prison. What distinguishes Eastern State from casual haunted house claims is consistency. Reports cluster around specific locations, repeat the same sensory details, and originate from people with no incentive to fabricate, often staff working alone late at night before the site was open to the public. The following accounts are among the most frequently cited, corroborated, and unsettling in the historical record of Eastern State Penitentiary. So we have Cellblock 12, the shadow that responds. One of the most widely reported paranormal incidents at Eastern State is associated with Cellblock 12, an area not typically highlighted in early ghost tours, but repeatedly mentioned by staff and investigators. Multiple visitors and guards have reported seeing a dark, humanoid shadow at the end of the Cellblock corridor. Sounds like me at my house at night.
Stairs in metal.
Yeah, exactly. Breakdown intensifies. Unlike ordinary shadow play, witnesses consistently note that the figure appears three-dimensional, blocking light rather than reflecting it. That's really unique because most of the time we have shadow figures. It's not really like a three-dimensional thing.
Yeah, it's like a 2D kind of apparition.
Exactly. Most of the time with shadow figures, it's seen really out of the corner of the eye and you look and it's gone.
Yeah.
Creepy. What makes these accounts particularly disturbing is interaction. Several witnesses have described calling out, assuming another person was present, only for the shadow to move in response, sometimes retreating into a cell, sometimes advancing before disappearing entirely. In more than one account, witnesses report feeling a sudden and overwhelming sense of dread immediately after the movement, often accompanied by chills or nausea. And that's something that, with other shadow figures has been a thing.
Yeah, especially the dread. I feel like that's really common when you see those. I think that and people's interaction with the Hat Man.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the Hat Man with like a sleep paralysis kind of thing, like the old hag syndrome kind of thing. That's we'll have to talk about that in another one.
Yeah, the Hat Man is a whole
Hat Man, old hag, sleep paralysis. Good God, that's why I don't sleep anymore.
And if you have stories where you've experienced the Hat Man or sleep paralysis or any kind of thing like that, send those to highway@montymater.com.
Yeah.
Because I would love to hear them. We would love to if you have stories of like hauntings that you just want to share on the podcast, we're happy to like share those at the end of an episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can send those to us.
Send all your freaky tales. I'd love to hear them.
See if we can scare ourselves.
These reports span years, involve unrelated individuals, and consistently describe a tall, dark shape, no discernible facial features, movement inconsistent with light or reflection, immediate emotional or physical reaction. No structural explanation has accounted for the phenomenon. Yeah, definitely an interesting kind of shadow figure entity kind of.
Yeah, I think the 3D thing is what kind of freaks me out when it looks like an actual body.
That's really different.
It's really strange.
Really unheard of. So now we have Cellblock 4, the crying cell. Cellblock 4 contains one of the most emotionally disturbing recurring reports at Eastern State, the sound of crying. Guards working overnight shifts and early preservation staff entering the building after closure have reported hearing soft, sustained weeping coming from a specific cell. The sound is often described as male, low, and exhausted. Another description of me. More despair than fear. See,
nailed it.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare anybody. When approached, the sound stops abruptly. Repeated inspections of the cell have revealed no animals, no airflow pattern sufficient to produce sound, no structural damage that would account for acoustics. What unsettles witnesses is not volume, but intimacy. The crying is often described as being only a few feet away, as if someone is sitting just inside the cell door. Several staff members have refused to work alone in this cell block after experiencing the phenomenon. That's pretty wild. To me, it sounds like a child spirit or something, you know?
Well, yeah, because they had the kids there.
Yeah, and with it being, you know,
that's
just the vibe I got from it, maybe. It's
sad. It's sad for everyone who experienced that, but man, for it to be like, I'm thinking like kids like 11 to 13.
Yeah.
Like, God damn.
Yeah, that's one thing when you look through history, it's just like, whether it's this, asylums, early hospital, it's like, what were they thinking, man?
Like, what were you doing? It's just, cruelty.
We've always been
cruel.
at the mercy of cruel, deranged people.
Yep.
Since the dawn of time. Always. You can't convince me otherwise. 2025 and nothing's changed.
Yep.
And now we have in Cellblock 14, the locksmith's encounter. One of the most cited firsthand accounts comes from a locksmith working on Cellblock 14 during early preservation efforts in the 1990s. At the time, Eastern State was not yet a public attraction. The building was largely dark, unstable, and empty. While attempting to open a cell door that had been sealed for decades, the locksmith reported feeling a sudden rush of air, followed by what he described as a powerful negative presence. He later stated that he felt physically pushed backwards, accompanied by an intense wave of fear and disorientation.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's really bizarre. Witnesses nearby reported hearing a loud metallic sound similar to a cell door slamming, despite no door having moved. And that's a real common thing in prisons. I think even in Alcatraz, they talk about hearing just something slamming like a door.
There's one in I can't remember its name now. It's one in New Mexico where the big riot was.
Yes. Yeah.
Same thing. I can't remember it. That story is also
put it on the list.
Put it on the list.
The locksmith refused to continue working in that cell block and left the site immediately. He later described the experience as unlike anything he had encountered in years of similar work. This account is notable because it occurred before Eastern State was marketed as haunted and involved a tradesperson with no reported interest in paranormal phenomenon. And, I mean, anytime you have somebody that kind of isn't a believer and something happens and it really changes their mind, that to me makes this situation very, very viable. You know, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we had this non-believer who something happened to him. Now all of a sudden he's like, he doesn't want to go back. Like
I think especially when it's like, you know, you like your general like blue collar like men especially who are like, I don't believe in that nonsense.
I'm a beer drinker.
And then they're like, I'm not going back there. That to me is very telling. When it's either when it comes from someone like that or it comes from someone who like, you know, someone who is a really analytical, like scientific person.
Absolutely.
Who is typically like, no nonsense. I want the data. I want the spreadsheet. And then they say they're like, I have this thing. I just can't explain it. I have no logical explanation for it.
At that point, those are the ones that are the most viable. It's like,
and they're the scariest.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's also disembodied laughter and whispered speech. Across multiple cell blocks, particularly 6 and 8, visitors and staff have reported disembodied voices. These are not clear sentences, but fragmented sounds. Whispering too soft to understand, short bursts of laughter, single words spoken directly behind the listener. What distinguishes these reports is directionality. Witnesses consistently describe the voices as Witnesses consistently describe the voices as coming from specific cells, often behind them, even when the corridor is otherwise silent. In some cases, staff have reported responding verbally, assuming another person was present, only to realize that they were alone. These experiences are especially disturbing given Eastern State's documented history of enforced silence. Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
What? That's so true?
Yeah. The light bulb just went.
Ding!
The idea that the most common reported phenomenon is sound, voices, crying, laughter, strikes many as deeply ironic. There's also footsteps in empty corridors. Perhaps the most persistent reports at Eastern State involve footsteps. Guards and overnight staff have described hearing time at one site, just right there. Overnight staff. Could you imagine?
No, thank you.
No thanks.
No thanks.
No, thank you.
And listen, I like going in haunted places.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
but
sure.
like that's my job.
Could you imagine?
No.
Just you're like a security guard, just sitting at like your little station.
Have you ever been in a place where like you were so scared you're like, I'm not going in there?
That's a really good question. I don't believe so. Early on, when I was a kid, my grandma had a really big house that was connected to the house. Yeah. And her house always just kind of scared me for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But then again, I'm a kid. So it's like you walk in, everything seems so big and empty and cavernous and all this stuff. And and it wasn't because of her. She was nice, nice person, but it was just always weirded me out. I think she had. There were some pieces like that, like some artwork that she had that I was like, that's creepy. At the end of the hallway, she had a statue, or it was a bust of David.
Oh my God.
And I'm 5 years old. Looking at this thing, I would run by it. I hated that thing. I wish I had it now.
When I was in Savannah and I did an overnight paranormal experience in the theater there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just called the Savannah Theater. It might be called something else, but it was really cool. We got to use, EMF read. We had all the technology that you wanted. And they had a lot of really cool, I still have videos of it. So if you watch season 1, my episode on Savannah it's in there. But there was a part of this building and there was parts that were pretty spooky. You could hear things, stuff would get knocked over. But there was this one hallway that I was like, nope. I'm not walking down that hallway. Yeah. I'm not going down there. And then at the very end, the hallway on one end leads to the green room of the theater. And we were in the green room and I have a video where you can see a shadow figure disappearing into the hall.
Crazy.
I'm like, no, that's the only time in a haunted situation like that where I was like, nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
And
I'm not doing it.
At the end of the day, just listen to your gut.
Yeah. Just don't do it. If your gut says no, don't do it.
It's probably right.
Yeah.
If you feel like you shouldn't go somewhere or somebody gives you the heebie-jeebies, as we say, don't do it. Listen to it.
Yep.
Perhaps, we were talking about the footsteps. Right, okay, I got off on the overnight staff. But they hear heavy boots walking directly behind them, slow pacing consistent with prisoner movement, footsteps approaching, then stopping abruptly. That would get me. Can you imagine if you're just walking, you hear just footsteps behind you, then it stops, turn around, nothing. Oh my God.
I couldn't work that job.
No, thank you. In multiple cases, witnesses reported turning around to confront what they believed was another guard, only to find an empty corridor stretching behind them.
Man.
Get a new job. These reports are often accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, which we've seen so many
standard
times.
In horror.
Feelings of being watched, heightened anxiety, or panic. Feelings of being watched would be really creepy. Importantly, Eastern States' stone floors and echoing architecture make footsteps easy to locate directionally. Witnesses emphasize that these sounds behave as if produced by a physical body.
Wow.
Okay. Now we have Cellblock 15, apparitions and full body figures.
No thanks.
So this is like the final boss of the place. Cellblock 15 is associated with some of the most visually specific reports. Multiple visitors have reported seeing full body apparitions standing inside cells, figures sitting on bunks, head and hands, shapes that vanished when directly observed. And that's kind of like the typical shadow person thing. One of the most unsettling aspects of these accounts is stillness. The figures are not aggressive. They do not chase. They simply exist, silently occupying space meant for isolation. Witnesses frequently describe overwhelming sadness rather than fear. Yep. It's it's like the energy that's just stuck there.
Yeah.
Psychological interpretation versus persistent patterns. Skeptics rightly point to Eastern States' environment as psychologically primed for suggestion. The building is immense, decayed, silent, and heavy with history. Darkness and expectation can shape perception.
And it
really can.
They also do. I was reading some Reddit forums, just looking at background of this. Mm-hmm. Apparently, they do an amazing haunted house at Halloween.
I was seeing that as well. That'd be really interesting to see. However, what complicates dismissal is pattern repetition. Right.
Yep. Same people are seeing the same thing. Yep. It would be different if people are seing completely different.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's always in the same
playing
place.
Tricks on you. Yeah, it's exactly. Many of these accounts predate commercial ghost tours and were reported by individuals working alone without audience or incentive. And again, that to me just heightens the credibility of it. Why would they make it up?
Yep.
they're not going to, I'm going to get all the money.
Yeah.
It's like, no, man. The guy, Paul Blart, security guard guy, was probably scared to death.
Or the locksmith,
Poor locksmith. Why Eastern State feels different. Eastern State Penitentiary was designed to strip identity through silence and isolation. For more than a century, human suffering occurred behind closed doors, unseen and unheard. The most reported paranormal phenomenon, voices, crying, footsteps, center around the return of sound. Whether one believes these experiences are supernatural, psychological, or environmental, the effect is the same. Eastern State feels occupied by something unfinished. Not violent, not theatrical, but present. The prison's architecture still funnels attention inward. Its cells still trap sound. Its corridors still erase distance. And for many who walk those halls, the sense is not that something is trying to scare them, but that something is still there, waiting to be acknowledged.
Oof. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
What would be out of those encounters? What do you think would be the most terrifying for you?
Yes. God, I mean, it's like really all of them. Not the voices, maybe, but I think the footsteps.
I think the footsteps for me too. Not just because like that's just terrifying and you're in this dark, creepy prison, but like as a woman, your immediate radar is like it's the way we feel when we walk through a parking lot. It's like, oh, there's a dude behind me, and then I couldn't do that.
And maybe that spectral shape, the more three-dimensional one, that would get me. I wouldn't want to see that.
Yeah, that's terrifying. So listen, Hellions, I have your travel itinerary because if you're new here, we do a travel itinerary to these cities. So if you are a traveler or you like doing a little bit of dark tourism, we give recommendations on what to see, what to do, where to eat. These come from personal travel experiences or research where we really try to tap into what locals are doing and what cities are famous for. I do love Philly. They are the most insane sports fans.
Yeah, they really are.
So depending on your level of hype, maybe gauge that. Maybe don't go when there's like an Eagles game or something. But the first place I would say to start in Philly is the Old City. And I love history. Any town that has like an old area, like a cobblestone street. I'm spending New Year's, because this is a couple weeks before New Year's. I'm spending New Year's in Charleston for the first time since I went to look at medical school there. So I'm really excited. But yeah, just really cool old town. But in Philly, I would start Old City first. And I would go early because it does get really crowded because there's Independence Hall and Independence Square. Really, really cool area. And I would definitely take the tour, which is part of the reason of going early because it gets really crowded, especially in the summer. And then there's the Liberty Bell and Elfris Alley, it's the oldest continually inhabited residential street in the U.S.
Wow.
And so it's just really cool old street that's all in the Old City.
Bet there's a lot of ghosts there.
And then for lunch on your first day, go to High Street Restaurant and Bakery. This is an Old City classic. It's wood-fired bread, seasonal plates, and it actually, in my opinion, out of all the lunch places I ate, has the best lunch menu in the city. And then you can go to the Library Company of Philadelphia. This is one of the oldest libraries in America. It's small, but really, really cool. And then they have a museum of the American Revolution, which is obviously really cool because of Philadelphia's role in that. Feels weird to say Philly in regards to the American Revolution. Philadelphia's role. For dinner, I would go to Soraya, which is a stunning, it's like Eastern Mediterranean food and atmosphere. So that's one of my favorite kinds of food is Mediterranean. Like I love really it's so fresh and they have all the breads and the dipping sauces, which is just amazing. And then that night, if you've listened to any episodes, you know I'm a sucker for a speakeasy. I'm actually getting ready to do a sober year and I'm kind of freaking out a little bit.
A year?
A year. Because I just want to see if I can do it. That's going to be, because what I don't like I've changed my relationship with alcohol a lot. Like we've talked about this when we were gigging all the time, like every day. And these were 4-hour shows and we'd have, you have a drink or 2 or 3. And then before you know it, you're like, I've had 15 drinks this week.
I was drinking like a wrestler.
We were. And I've changed that because I'm not downtown. I'm not drinking very much. But what I don't like about my relationship with alcohol is that when I get really, really stressed, the first thing I do is get a drink.
That's me too,
and that's the habit I want to break. I don't want to be dependent on it in any way.
Yeah.
I want it to be something where I don't need it as a crutch in any way, but like if I really want to have something, then I can have it, or if it's a special event.
Yeah.
I really, that's why for me, I want to see if I can do a year, because then I have to experience holidays and experience stress and get through it. without, am I going to be sober my whole life? I don't think so.
Me either.
Because I want a good cocktail every once in a while. I want a nice glass of wine, but I want to change my relationship with it. So I just decided I was going to do a year.
No, more power to you. And I think with the whole thing of not being in the downtown environment, I mean, I know we have shows coming up and more stuff coming, but it's there's something about that downtown environment that just enables drinking.
Yes.
It's like, for me, just seeing everybody else drink and being a sober person around a bunch of drunk people is annoying.
Hard.
I'm like, I kind of want to get just to where that isn't.
Like where I'm a little
annoying.
buzzed. I'm a little buzzed. Yeah. And if you're someone who likes hard rock and heavy metal music, we are getting ready to do to release music this coming spring. You can follow that on Instagram at Monty and the Monsters, and it's MONTE. But yeah, so since that's changed, I don't drink as much, but I am getting ready to make that change.
That's great.
All that to say, your speakeasy
Sorry.
when you go to Philadelphia, Hop Sing Laundromat. So I love this place because there's no phones. They do not allow you to use your phone. Like
really?
it is meant to go there and be part of the moment and be with who you're with. The cocktails are amazing. And this feels like very Philly. This doesn't feel touristy at all. If you're like, I absolutely can't do the no phones thing, Sassafras, which is an absinthe bar.
Cool.
And it's in the old city. It's candle lit, really, really beautiful. But I love Hop Sing. I love places and shows where they take your phone away. Because it's just good practice for all of us, right? Because we're so used to it.
I was going to say that place sounds like a Tool concert.
Right? You're right, it does.
No phones.
And then on your second day, you got to go to the Philadelphia Museum of Art steps, also known as the Rocky Steps.
Yes.
I have run these before. Play Eye of the Tiger as you run up and down them. It's worth it. And then they have the Art Museum grounds and I can't pronounce these, Schuylkill River Trail. The trail is beautiful. I don't know how to pronounce it.
I got to see that word 1 second.
But the Schuylkill? Schuylkill. There it is. The voice of God has spoken. Schuylkill River Trail. Really great. But if you're going to go to one of those, go to the Museum of Art steps because have your Rocky moment. You need to do it.
Yes.
And then as for lunch the second day, you have to do a cheesesteak. You have to do a cheesecake. So if you want just like an overall classic, simple John's roast pork. My favorite is Angelo's Pizzeria. The bread is just like unhinged.
It's insane.
It's so good. It's so good. And then in the afternoon, go to Rittenhouse Square. This is a great like coffee spot, people watching. And then there's the Walnut Street back blocks, which are just local shops, galleries, just really kind of a cool local area. I'm the kind of person like always go to the tourist stops if you've never been to a city, but then make time for where the locals go. That's where you're really going to find unique things. And for dinner that night, I would go to Little Nana's, a really good local Italian spot, which actually sounds really good right now because I haven't eaten today.
Me either.
Right. We got to quit doing that. We got to quit doing that.
I don't know. My clothes don't fit too good anymore.
And then if you like live music, I would highly recommend going to World Cafe Live or Johnny Brenda's. World Cafe is really intimate shows, really good sound. Johnny Brenda's is like an indie rock and alternative spot. So that's where we would be hanging out.
Absolutely.
And then day 3, of course, you're going to go to Eastern State Penitentiary. Give yourself at least 3 hours to really like take it all in. You can see the solitary confinement cells. You can see Al Capone's cell that's been rebuilt. And they do have medical and like punishment exhibits. So you can see like the iron gag and they have a lot of the history put up there as well. And if you're going at Halloween, they have an incredible haunted house. And then there's for lunch that day, Bar Hige, which is Nordic inspired comfort food. I was like in touch with my inner Viking. So good. I was a big fan of this. And this was not something I planned. It was something I kind of stumbled upon. And it was just really, really amazing. And in the afternoon, I would go to Laurel Hill Cemetery. I love visiting cemeteries. I think they're really beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
I like walking. Obviously it's a little spooky. It's a little eerie, but I like walking around and like thinking about these people's lives and remembering them. Like, I wonder what they went through. I wonder what they experienced. And if the Muter Museum is open, it's like a medical oddities museum, like anatomy, like things like that. It's not for everyone, but if you're kind of into the odd and the weird, Muter Museum is great.
I would be there.
For dinner the third night, I would go to Fork. This is kind of a modern American spot, and has a lot of Philadelphia history. And then late night, the Ranstead Room is an intimate cocktail den. It feels like a secret. Like you feel like, I'm not supposed to be in here.
Love it.
Really, really cool. I'm still going to be giving you, by the way, even in my sober year, I'm still going to be giving you cocktail and bar recommendations because Drink the bourbon for me.
You're gonna make me drink.
Right? It's like, you got to do it. Try these.
And it looked like Barney Gumble from The Simpsons. A lot of Simpsons references.
And on your last day, day 4, go to the Reading Terminal Market. Again, this is another place to go early, and there's lots of things to eat. It's a huge market. I would recommend Dinek's roast pork, the Dutch eating place for breakfast, and Beeler's Donuts. And then as you get into later in the day, there's also an Italian market that has food stalls, murals, old school shops. And then there's Magic Gardens, which is mosaics. It's weird. It's colorful, very, very Philadelphia. Lunch, the final favorite is go to Middle Child. It's a modern deli, and I will fight somebody for a good sandwich. Fight somebody for a good sandwich. For the last dinner, go to Royal Boucherie, which is a French restaurant with a little bit of edge, a little bit of fun themed. And then for all you book nerds, your last drink is going to come from Writer's Block Rehab, which is a literary themed cocktail bar.
Cool.
That made me so very happy. And for if you're traveling in and you're wondering about renting a car, I found Philadelphia to be really walkable. And like if you do need an Uber or Lyft for a longer distance, easy to get to, easy to access. And obviously, if you're in a strange city that you're not familiar with, use the Uber and Lyft at night.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you're really close to your hotel or whatever. But Philly's a fun town.
Yeah.
It really, really is. The food is great. There's so much history. And that's my favorite kind of city. I love cities that have a lot of old history.
Me too.
And a lot of like the newer stuff. And I'm a big foodie and cocktail person, obviously. So that's it, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Highway to Hell. Send us your spooky stories at highway@montemader.com. That's MONTEMADER.com. We would love to start sharing some community stories from the Hellions.
That would be a blast.
It would be really fun
I'd
to
really
do at the
enjoy
end of
that.
episodes. That's kind of that's one of our goals, is to be able to read these stories and share them with you. So we will see you next week on Highway to Hell.
See you guys. Thank you.